Hi everyone, it's Rabbi Dr. Jack Cohen. Welcome back to part 3 of the classic dating text and marriage text of the river, the kettle, and the bird. We have some wonderful stuff in store for you tonight. As always, before we start, I'd like to put a plug in for Shidduch Profiles, an organization which is a fantastic database to put up your Shidduch resume or to go looking for a prospective spouse for yourself or a friend and associate. I strongly recommend it. I've made between 5 and 7 shidduchim from there in the less than a year. I love it because they vet everyone, so you know you're getting a high quality person. Again, Shidduch Profiles Plus, used to be called Partners of Shidduchim, is a great place to put up your resume or to go looking for resumes. If you need help in that, feel free to reach out to me. I can show you how to write up a personal profile. I can act as your advocate if need be, which is required there to have an advocate to represent you. And if you have any questions on dating from anywhere in the world, feel free to reach out to me on WhatsApp or call me, 305-206-1916. I'll try my best to answer those questions or to evaluate your relationship. If you need to get matched up, let me know between myself and the Shadchanim that I know. I'm sure we can help you out. Or if you have any questions in Shalom Bayit, feel free to reach out to me. Tonight we continue the study of this classic book, The River, the Kettle, and the Bird. As I may have said in the first episode, this was the book that was the go-to book for dating almost 40 years ago when I was at the chapter or Parsha in dating. And it's amazing because it's written by one of the great minds of the yeshiva world, Rabbi Feldman. Rabbi Feldman is the Rosh Yeshiva or Dean of the great yeshiva of Ner Yisrael of Baltimore. Baruch Hashem, I was there yesterday. I had a bracha under the chuppah for one of my clients who got married from Detroit. I wanted to give a shout out and a mazel tov to Shalom Cohen, who's starting his new life with his second wife, and his wife Libby is also a second marriage for her as well. There is hope if the first one doesn't make it, but we're going to try our best to ensure that what we learn today will help us to, do our best effort so that we never have an issue that we never have to go down that route of second or third marriages. Okay, now, marriage would not be so challenging if only the problems we've discussed were involved maintaining, observing mitzvos, or coming to terms with your spouse's nature. A more serious problem, however, faces every couple, every partnership, and that is the great or horrible midah or quality of anger or ka'as, as it's known in Hebrew. More than anything else, it is anger which undermines most relationships between husband and wife. And anger can be expressed, ladies and gentlemen, in many forms. While it's usually conveyed through a raised and threatening voice, it can also express itself in the mild form of annoyance, or being sarcastic, or being insulting. If you want peace in your home, you're going to have to learn to avoid or at least control this horrible midah of anger. It is well known that I tell girls, especially when they're dating, to look out for 3 qualities that I feel are big red flags in guys: anger, inflexibility, and being cheap or miserly. So anger, we have to study tonight. Before discussing how to deal with it, we must pinpoint its causes. What causes anger? What provokes anger? And which circumstances makes it difficult to control? Fortunately for us, the sages or our rabbis have taught us what these causes are, and we'll see what the causes are by studying the well-known story of Hillel, the great tzaddik, and the man who tried to make Hillel angry. And the story goes like this. It's brought down from the Talmud. 2 men made a bet with each other. Who can get Hillel angry? Whoever does is going to have to pay the other one 400 zuz, which is a tremendous amount of money at the time. It was Friday, Erev Shabbos, and Hillel was washing his hair, taking his shower. One of the men passed by the entrance to incite Hillel. He yelled out, "Who is called Hillel here? Who lives here that's named Hillel?" And he said the same request twice. Who lives here that's called Hillel? Hillel, in the middle of his shower, wrapped himself in his cloak, went out to greet the man. "My son," the rabbi said, "what is it that you want?" "I have a question to ask," the man began. "Ask, my son, ask," Hillel responded, very calmly. "Why is it that the heads of the Babylonian people are round?" "You've asked a great question," Hillel answered. "And I'll tell you why. Because they don't have alert midwives. So when they pull the child out of the canal, when the woman is delivering the baby, they're not careful with the head, and as a result, they mistreat the head, and their midwives are not as qualified to do that work, and they sort of cause the heads of the babies to be shaped round." The men waited a short while, and Hillel had gone back to take a shower, and went back to take his shower. And then the men yelled out again, "Who's called Hillel here? Who's called Hillel?" As if he didn't know who Hillel was. Hillel again wrapped himself in his cloak, went outside. He said, "My son, what is it that you wish?" Very calmly. I have a question to ask, the man said. And Hillel encouraged him, ask, my son, ask. Why are the eyes of the people from the Talmudia weak? And Hillel again answered, you've asked a very important question, because these people live among sand dunes, and as a result, sand goes in their eyes and weakens their eyes. The man went away, waited a short while, returned, and he yelled out a third time, who's called Hillel? Who is called Hillel? Hillel wrapped himself in his cloak, went out to greet the man. He asked him, my son, what is it that you wish? Once again, the man repeated, I have a question to ask, the third question. Meanwhile, he's interrupting Hillel on a very short Friday afternoon, in the middle of a shower. Ask, my son, came the patient response from the great sage Hillel. And he asked the question, why are the feet of Africans broad? My son, you asked a great question, because they live among the swamps. And as a result, they're constantly going through the swamps, and their feet flatten and become wide and broad. Frustrated, the man made one final attempt. I have many questions to ask, but I'm afraid you might get angry. Hillel calmly sat down with the man. Ask all the questions that you want, my son. No worries. In desperation, the man asked, are you Hillel, who's called leader of the Jewish people? And Hillel answered, yes, I am. If you are he, then may there be no more like you in Israel. Why, my son? Why? Why would you say that? Because of you, the man said, I lost 400 zuz because I lost the wager. Control yourself, said Hillel. It's better that you lost 800 zuz rather than make Hillel angry. All the methods which the man used to anger Hillel derive from his understanding of one important principle, and that is, let's get at the principle that prevented Hillel from getting angry. Anger is nothing more than the expression of pride, gaiva, ga'ava as we call it. The rabbis refer to the Yetzer Hara towards anger as a false god within us. This false god is actually the god of self-worship, that we worship ourselves. We become angry when our exaggerated self-esteem is threatened, and that's what makes us get angry. When we're threatened, we wish deep in our subconscious to destroy whoever threatens us. However, because of our convictions, of our upbringing, we're unwilling to able to do so, so we try to control ourselves. The result is subdued violence or anger. We're upset because someone threatens our ego. And so we can't hit back, so we lash out in a verbal tirade of anger. The loud voice of anger threatens to harm the person who's challenging our pride. The violence, the verbal violence of anger that we direct at him or her is intended to destroy their worth for having challenged my self-esteem. All this we do to avenge our beleaguered pride. It comes down to gaiva, protecting our honor. The man who wanted to anger Hillel understood this principle well. In addition, the man understood just as well which circumstances create the psychological pressures which makes it difficult for all of us to control our anger. This man was not stupid. He used a variety of techniques to arouse, to challenge, and to make it difficult for Hillel to contain himself, because he was trying to attack Hillel's pride. The man began by calling out at the entrance of Hillel's house, who is called Hillel here? He said it twice. Every time he came, he asked the same question twice. Who's called Hillel? By doing this, the man demonstrated that Hillel, the most important person in the Jewish world, was a complete unknown. It's as if going to Trump's house and saying, who is Trump here? Who is Trump? So the first thing he wanted to do was attack Hillel's reputation, his place in society. He was the head of the Jewish world. He wasn't even sure of his name and his address. This attack to Hillel's self-esteem was meant to set the stage for the subsequent attacks. He waited until Friday. He didn't coincidentally show up to Hillel's house on Tuesday or Wednesday. He came purposely on Friday, Erev Shabbos, the eve of Shabbos, the eve of the Sabbath, the time of the week when we're most busy and most prone to be incited, because pressure makes it more difficult for us to control our anger. You know how it is, Friday afternoon, especially these days in the winter, so much to do and so much to get done. Kids have to be in the shower, you may have guests coming, you're trying to get all the shopping done. It's a time that you can easily get provoked. And the man knew what he was doing. Erev Shabbos is a perfect time to arouse one's anger. So the man waited until Hillel's hair was wet, and going outdoors would be unpleasant for Hillel, since that would make it harder for him to control anger. Imagine you're in the middle of a shower, and someone calls you, and you leave in the middle of the shower to go and talk to him. You're not going to be too happy. You will not be a pleasant, happy camper. Finally, it's most difficult to control your anger when someone feels self-righteous. What does that mean? If you're interrupted while busy doing something, and you feel like you're doing a mitzvah, which in this case Hillel was taking a shower, which is a mitzvah for Shabbos, you feel justified to retaliate in anger because there you are doing something which is supposed to be a mitzvah, and how dare someone come and contravene you or get in the way. In this case, his moral training does not obligate him to control himself because he feels like I'm doing a mitzvah. Thus the man waited until Hillel was engaged in the mitzvah of preparing for Shabbos, when Hillel will be most vulnerable. Like, how dare such a person get in the way of me doing a mitzvah? How often do we get angry at people when we're in the middle of doing a mitzvah because we feel that they're getting in the way and they're doing something to annoy us? Besides interrupting a very important person, besides interrupting the performance of a mitzvah, besides interrupting at the least opportune time of the week, each in itself was enough of a provocation to get any person angry. This instigator interrupted for ridiculous matters, which would have never been brought up at all. He asked ridiculous questions. The causes of anger are cumulative. The more an affront is repeated, the more difficult it becomes to control it. If someone just incites you and keeps doing the very same thing to you, eventually you're going to blow up. Not only does the victim wish to retaliate the present affront, he also wants to take revenge for past offenses. In addition, a repeated affront becomes more grievous with each time it's done. The first or even the second time, you might want to swallow the offense, but by the third time it's done to you, one could be certain that you are the target of abuse and you may lash out. When all else failed, what did the man do? He decided to take another approach. Let me insult Hillel directly. Why not? So he prepared him for the insult by attempting to lessen Hillel's motivation for control. He tells him, I have many questions to ask you, but I'm afraid you'll become angry, as if to say he wants to open the door for Hillel to get angry. In so saying, he acknowledged Hillel's right to get angry with him. Hillel, you have a right to get angry. He was trying to give him the pivot to get angry. Then he tried to build up Hillel's feelings of self-importance. Whenever someone is made to feel important, he becomes more sensitive to insult. You're a great guy, you're righteous, you're the president of the shul. So now when they build you up like that, then you're going to protect your honor even more. As it says in the Torah, pride comes before the fall. The man therefore asked Hillel, are you Hillel, leader of the Jewish people? When Hillel answered yes, he unleashed what he believed would be his decisive blow. Then may there be no more like you in Israel. But this too failed to anger the great Hillel, because anger arises out of your perception that your prestige is under attack. This had no effect on Hillel, who was so humble. He didn't view himself or the attack upon him. Hillel was so humble that he perceived himself unworthy of honor to begin with. So he didn't take the man's statement as an attack. Hillel had no pride, which could be attacked. It appears from Hillel's comment, control yourself, he told him, that the man who tried to anger Hillel became angry himself. And that's not surprising. His pride was now shattered, having lost the bet and a sizable sum of money. And he blamed his failure on Hillel. But the losses, as Hillel explained to him, were not a legitimate basis for anger, since there's nothing more valuable than controlling your anger. As Hillel told him, better that you lose 800 or double the amount of the wager and not make anyone angry, not me or yourself. Anger, Hillel was trying to teach the man, maybe a short-term way of gaining satisfaction, as they say, like an emotional cocaine, but it's worthless in comparison to the incredible eternal value of maintaining your self-control, as we call milchat nefesh, a composed soul. To summarize, the principles derived from the story of Hillel are: anger is a reaction to when your pride is injured. B, discomfort and pressure are usually environments that even induce anger to come on faster. Feelings of self-righteousness weaken your desire to control yourself and may incite you to get angry. It becomes more difficult to control anger each time the affront is repeated. Okay, let's continue. Now, we tend to react with anger or annoyance when our ego is affronted or attacked. When I'm attacked, when my ego is attacked, when my name is attacked, when my reputation is attacked, that's when we go into full offense. In order to combat and contain these reactions, we must become conscious of the variety of affronts which can trigger us. If we know the causes and we can look at the symptoms, we can now protect against it, and so we're ready whenever we're assaulted by the Yetzer Hara to provoke us to get angry. Criticism, let's start with that. No one loves criticism. No one looks for it. All criticism is taken by everyone as a personal attack. Criticism implies that you have a fault and that you're not perfect. Many of us live in an illusion that we're nearly faultless. We think we're faultless. Although all sometimes forced to recognize that we all have certain deficiencies, we tell ourselves that we're not interested in being better or that we have not been blessed with the same opportunities. Anyone who criticizes us is claiming that we're really not as faultless as we've imagined. And this we take as an insult. So we don't like criticism because we have this perception in our minds that we're faultless. And whoever attacks me or criticizes me is going to the heart of that. We don't like that. Of course, not everyone thinks of themselves so highly. But even people with a low self-image are no less offended when another person points out their faults. Because they've become accustomed to living with the illusion and no one notices their shortcomings, people are thinking that, I'm cool, I'm great. So they take that criticism as an affront. Regardless of their self-image, people's response to criticism is generally the same. They lash out with the big A, anger. This is especially so with respect to criticism offered by a wife or a husband. Unless your ego is controlled, a husband or a wife usually expects to be admired and adored by the spouse. As a wise person once said, the average person wants their spouse to be smart enough to understand them and stupid enough to appreciate them. If it's true that criticism generally evokes anger, it is doubly true in the case of a spouse's criticism. A critical spouse, in most people's perceptions, is failing to perform their duty. Consequently, that compounds their angry response. There are two standard responses to criticism, both designed to defend your ego, and therefore may lead to anger. One, you justified and counterattack. Both are totally incorrect. Justification means saying in effect, I'm right, you're wrong. You justify your behavior and you counterattack the person by saying you're wrong. I'm wrong, but you're too, so two wrongs make a right. So you attack them. Consider the following illustration. A wife asks her husband to buy tomatoes on the way home from work. He forgets. When he arrives home, she criticizes him for his forgetfulness. You're always forgetting to do the things I ask you to do. In response to her criticism, you just remain there quiet. The husband is likely to feel a sensation of anger that's storming inside of him. If he chooses the justification response, a flood of excuses as to why he forgot the tomatoes will come to mind. What do you want? I wasn't feeling well today. Or the boss was on my back and I forgot. Someone kept me busy and as a result I forgot. Or I have too many things on my mind lately. Or I'm in the rush, I had to get to shul. One cannot help but marvel at our ability to think so quickly when we're under attack. We seem to be able to find some justifiable reason. The counterattack response sounds like this. True, I forgot to get the tomatoes, but last week you forgot to pick up the laundry. You're always asking me to do things which you can take care of yourself. Don't you know how busy I am? Why are you even bothering me with this request? Even when I get you tomatoes, you leave half of them in the refrigerator and they just end up rotting away. I may have forgotten, but it's nothing compared to how wrong it is to get upset with me for this. So you have either justification or counterattack. Both these types of responses are inappropriate and misguided. They result in charges and countercharges which only lead to more conflict, more strife between the husband and the wife. There is one correct response, an honest appraisal of the charge. Very often the criticism is accurate. If so, even if the criticism is offered the wrong way, the reaction could simply be, you got me, I'm wrong. And I always mention this to my clients. Shaul HaMelech, or King Saul, was king. He was given the job of going to wipe out Amalek, the enemy of the Jews. And Shmuel the prophet, who gave him the order, told him, wipe out everything and everyone, including animals. So King Saul or Shaul went to battle. He destroyed Amalek. Shmuel was on the battlefield. He was coming to greet Shaul when he heard the bleeping of sheep. So Shmuel says to Shaul, what's this sound of sheep that I hear? And Shaul said, you know what? We thought, what a shame to kill the animals. Let's use them for personal use and sacrifices. Shmuel became very upset with him. And he said, I told you to eliminate everything. Unfortunately, as the story goes, the king of Amalek, using witchcraft, turned himself into a sheep, was able to have relations with a woman, and the entire Amalek, which had been decimated, could have been wiped out forever, was now restarted all over again. And the nation was able to, again, rebound and thrive all over again. All because Shaul didn't listen to what Shmuel told him to do. And what did Shmuel say to him? You've been rejected by Hashem. You're no longer wanted as king of the nation of Israel. Now, put that on the side, and let's study the story of David HaMelech with the story of Bathsheba, where he ends up getting close to her and being intimate with her. And Natan the prophet at the time comes into David and tells him an analogy about something similar where someone took advantage of someone else's property. David HaMelech got the message and he said 2 words. And those 2 words explain to us why he and his lineage will always control the seed of Mashiach, Messiah. He said, Chatati la Hashem. I have sinned to God. He owned it. David HaMelech owned it. So if you're criticized, and more than likely it's true, just say, you got me, I'm wrong. Normally, at that point, criticism will stop, conflict will come to an end, and you can move on to the next subject matter. As the rabbis tell us, if someone calls you donkey, put a saddle on your back. The Vilna Gaon tells us this means, if someone says you have a fault, admit it, and they'll stop talking about it. This is a proven method, which will prevent the inevitable quarreling if you go ahead and attempt justification or counterattack. It's possible, of course, that after an honest appraisal of the criticism, the charge will have been found to have been false. Does this give you a good reason to become angry? The answer is negative. More often than not, baseless criticism leads to misunderstandings. Why else would the person have a criticism? So you have to look into it, right? Here's another reason. Jealousy. So we said that criticism is one of the sources of anger. Jealousy is another source of anger. Let's study that. Because of our inflated view of ourselves, we can't tolerate the better treatment given to other people. Gets us nervous, gets us jealous. This is an anger triggered by jealousy, because we don't like it when others are treated better than us. Right? Why does so-and-so deserve better attention than me? Obviously, that means that we're not as good. And so we're jealous of that. We will be especially hurt if so-and-so is competing with us. Competition makes us more sensitive to the success of our rival, makes us more aware of our own failures. The rabbis tell us that every tradesman dislikes every other tradesman in the field. Kol uman soneh ba'al umanuto. Every tradesman, right, has a dislike for his fellow tradesman. It's just the nature of the way things work in this world. A certain carpenter will be competitive and envious of his fellow carpenter, a policeman, a doctor, a lawyer. It's the way it goes. Each tradesman feels that if not for his competitors or her competitors, everyone will recognize that they're the best. It's only my competitors getting in the way. The success of the competitor is taken as an affront to our personal prestige. Very often a husband is jealous of his wife's love for her parents. For this reason, if a wife praises her parents in front of the husband, he'll find himself growing annoyed or angry with his wife. Such a reaction is all the more likely if a wife praises another man before her husband, which he views as competition. Remarkably enough, a person may even be jealous of their own children. For example, they feel that his wife pays more attention to their infant than to him. He will find himself both angry at his wife and the baby. I had a Shalom Bayis case like this, where a man stormed out of the house and left the house for a few days because he felt that his wife gave more attention and gave priority to their son over him. Thank God we solved that. Okay, now, jealousy can often be counteracted by the simple admission that jealousy exists. Facing the immaturity of the emotion lets in a healthy gust of air. To counteract jealousy, one may very properly try to awaken in oneself feelings of love for the object of jealousy. This can be accomplished by reminding yourself of all the good which the person in question has done for him. You may be jealous of that person, but try to find good qualities about that person. He's kind to me. He takes me to shul. He gave me a lift to the airport. Find what you can find good about that person. He or she lends me chali. She's there for me when at a PTA, etc. Right? When this feeling exists, there won't be place for jealousy. Find a good nikudah, a good point about the person that you're jealous of, and then you can try to eradicate that feeling of jealousy. Awakening love for that person is effective, not only counteracting jealousy, but against all types of anger, as noted in the next thing we'll talk about. Since becoming angry at anyone means that one would like to get rid of that person, evoking emotions of love towards him or her will neutralize that jealousy. Another reason that we fall into anger is disobedience. We are all hurt if our wishes are not carried out. In our all-consuming selfishness, human beings, we're selfish. And we live in an era where selfishness is reigning. We must all have our desires fulfilled. Anyone who frustrates our desires, by definition, is our enemy. This certainly holds true for a husband or a wife. We've already discussed how people enter marriage fantasizing about the fulfillment of all their dreams and desires, expecting to always kept always in good spirits. A husband who finds his desires frustrated readily concludes that his wife has not been doing her job, or even that he should not have married her because she's not fulfilling his perceived role 100%. Similarly, if a wife fails to carry out her husband's requests, a husband will treat her the same way he would treat someone who has failed to pay his debt on time, namely with anger, like a business associate. Even if the husband's requests are being honored, there will be an intimation that won't continue in the future and can bring about the same response of anger. For example, a man asks his wife to stop off at the bank and make a deposit, but the wife forgets. Were it a friend who forgot, he wouldn't get so upset. But why is it that when the wife forgets, he blows up? What's going on here? What's behind this dynamic? That if it's the wife that's involved, he blows up. But if it was his friend that he asked him to go to the bank, he wouldn't nearly as blow up to the extent that he does with the wife. Why is that so? Ordinarily, a husband who asks himself about his exaggerated reaction will probably explain that I can't stand unreliable people. But what's really at stake here is the husband's perception that his wife doesn't consider his wishes to be of supreme importance. That she's supposed to be there 100% for me. And she's supposed to acknowledge and take care of all my requests. He suspects that forgetting the bank deposit is an indication that she doesn't see serving a husband as her primary duty. Like she shirked her duty. Therefore, his response is off with her head. How dare she forget to go to the bank? A husband's self-centeredness gives rise to anger when confronted with another form of disobedience, failure to follow his advice or accept his opinion. It's always painful to have someone disagree with you. By not following your viewpoint, in effect, they're causing an affront to your ego. Under ordinary circumstances, we may or not react with anger. But if we believe that the person is obligated to listen to us, we'll almost certainly react with anger. We have this perception in our heads, my spouse should be doing what I expect him to do. Indeed, our anger is directed proportionally to the degree with which we feel the other person is obligated to listen to us. Parents, for example, can get angry at a 3-year-old for disobeying them. Unreasonably, the parent's honor is offended by the child's disobedience. After all, they told the child to eat, and the child refused to follow simple instructions. How dare the child not listen? This is even truer with respect to older children. Parents can become even violently angry with them when they act disobediently. This, in fact, is the explanation for child abuse. Why do parents abuse their children? Because they expect that child to fall in line and do everything as they want. Following this reasoning, if a husband begins with the fantasy, if he begins his marriage career with the fancy that his wife ought to adore, admire him without reservation, it's understandable why he gets angry or annoyed at her refusal to follow his opinion or take his advice. Fights often ensue when a man and a woman are working together on a project, for example, and they disagree on how it should be done. Now, however, if marriage were to be approached with Torah-oriented values, such anger would be avoided. In a Torah home, there's no place for an argument. Rabbi Ada bar Abba, the Talmudic figure, said that he married a long life because he never got upset with his wife over household matters. He wouldn't get involved in jurisdictions that are not yours. We have said that a wife makes it possible for a husband to learn how to be kind to another human being because the venue of marriage and the framework of marriage is what guides us and disciplines us to become better people. The idea that a wife must follow her husband blindly and adore him unconditionally is a dangerous delusion. Angry demands for obedience are counterproductive. You can't demand that someone be obedient to you. Your spouse is not your slave. They make a wife less willing to listen to her husband. It's the nature of a woman to subordinate herself to her husband, but a woman will do only so if she feels her husband loves her. In general, it's good advice for a husband to train himself not to overly rely upon his wife's services. Rabbi Miller, my Rabbi, would always say, you've got 2 legs. Don't sit there at the kitchen table demanding, I need a spoon, I need a fork, I need a knife, get me the cottage cheese. Get up and get it yourself. You're not an invalid. Anger over disobedience can be avoided if the situation is put into the proper perspective. Giving someone the benefit of the doubt is one of the 600 mitzvahs of the Torah. Da'al lekav zechut. And it's not just a mitzvah, it's good, solid, logical policy. If the wife forgets the husband's request that she go to the bank, it's not a sign of mutiny. She may not have been able to do so for a million reasons. She may even have had to attend to other matters which are more, as important, that involved her family or her husband. Any reasonable person would agree that it's extremely far-fetched to assume to be a rebellion against the husband's authority. The problem here is that the husband doesn't admit that the rebellion is his worry. He just cannot stand unreliable people. Another reason that causes anger are associations. Because of his past experiences, a husband may attach unintended significance to his wife's actions. Sometimes a wife can do an innocent or trivial act which causes the husband to erupt. For example, some husbands become very annoyed if their wives don't spell correctly. Lack of this skill to them means a lack of culture or intelligence. The husband looks at it as a personal affront. How is it that my wife can't spell that simple word? He's afraid that she might demonstrate her ignorance in public, and by association, he'll be branded uncultured, unintelligent, God forbid. We've known husbands who became annoyed if their wives opened up their eggs for them at breakfast. This reminds them of some overbearing authority. The opened egg thereby becomes a symbol of attempt. Are you trying to dominate me? Sometimes the way a woman dresses will upset a husband because of this disagreeable association with its style. Sometimes the way you squeeze a toothpaste tube will start wars. An engagement between a couple was nearly broken because the young woman occasionally would wrinkle her forehead, even though the young man realized that his response was irrational. He would become intolerably irritated and go on a rant against his fiancée wherever she would wrinkle her head in his presence. It didn't take long to discover what was causing this man to erupt like this. The young man's mother was a proper middle-class woman who believed that cultured people don't wrinkle their foreheads, certainly not in public. From childhood, she had admonished her son never to do that because that's boorish behavior. Naturally, as he grew up, it became a symbol of boorishness to him. And as a result, now he had it implanted in his psyche, so when his fiancée did it, he saw it as boorish behavior because it was planted there by his mother. Fortunately, the problem was not difficult to solve. As soon as the young man became aware of the reason behind his objections, the young man made peace with the wrinkles. Besides, when the girl learned about his objections, she began to control herself. The tragedy of a broken engagement was averted by putting an imagined affront in its proper perspective. In the same manner, the annoying associations of someone's actions can be diffused with honesty and self-awareness. Here's another reason that gets people angry. The principle of the thing. We often delude ourselves into thinking that we are angry for noble reasons. I have a right to be angry. We'll say, I realize that what I did is what was done to me, the affront to me that was done to me was trivial. What bothers me, got me angry, is the principle of the thing. A shopkeeper, for example, has overcharged you by 50 cents. It's not a large amount of money, but you're so upset you toss and turn and now you can't sleep. Your extreme reaction, you tell yourself, is not due to the money, but the principle of it. How dare he be dishonest with me? This, however, is incorrect. It cannot be the principle of dishonesty which bothers you. Would you be upset if the same thing happened from your friend? Do you not completely hear and read about all this kind of stuff regularly? The main reason for your distress is that the person who overcharged you has made you look stupid. The only principle involved is your firm belief that you're the smartest person on earth. So how dare the guy take advantage of me and demonstrate publicly that I'm stupid? The principle of the thing is not what it appears to be in the following illustration as well. A man had arranged to meet his wife at a certain street corner at 10 o'clock in the morning sharp. She arrives 1 hour late, by which time the husband is now fuming. No explanation by the wife can placate the guy. The husband is aware that he's overreacting to her lateness. He understands that accidents happen. And he made good use of his waiting time reviewing some important business documents. Still, he cannot contain his anger. He explains his extreme reaction by telling himself that he can't tolerate another person who doesn't keep their word. It may well be, however, that he interprets her lateness as an act of disrespect towards him. How dare she show up late? After all, I'm king. He reminds himself of the times she rushed herself to make sure she got on time to all her other appointments. And he's angry because she slighted him. By admitting that our ego has been offended, it'll be much easier to contain the anger. As we've seen from the story of Hillel, causes of anger can be for many reasons. Even if we don't react to an anger stimulus, it remains in our memory. And if the offense is repeated, we can be doubly angry. So we have to be careful. We have to be careful not to allow this to build in our archive and to forget it as soon as possible. That's very, very important. Now, the grievances which anger the husband could be his own making. when a man enters a marriage with unrealistic expectations about marriage, they'll blame their spouse or the wife or the husband. The wife will blame the husband will blame the wife, because there's a gap between reality and their fantasy. Why didn't he or she create the instant bliss which every spouse is supposed to create for me? Why do they have faults? Why are there financial and other problems? Why is he or she not as successful in their studies and other activities as I hope to be? All these grievances can be resolved by the awareness of being realistic in marriage. As Rabbi always tells us in the 10 Commandments of marriage, be realistic. Don't fantasize. We protect our pride by blaming others for our mistakes. It is one of human beings' most ingrained reactions. The first person to do so was Adam, who reacted to God's question about whether he ate from the tree of knowledge in this matter. The woman you gave me, she gave me from the tree and ate. Adam right away put the blame on his wife. What's going on here? It helps us maintain and untarnish some image of ourselves. By blaming someone else, I perceive myself to be the right person. I'm okay. And that's why we have to be careful. Blaming others can be carried to ridiculous extremes. So we have to be very careful. And the most convenient person, unfortunately, to blame in our lives can be our spouse. He or she, of course, they're readily available to be blamed. In addition, the fantasy persists that if he or she would have been the perfect person that I imagined them to be, no problem would have arisen. For this reason, we turn to our scapegoat, and that's our spouse. And we make them the scapegoat, which is terrible. So we have to be very careful. We have to be very careful not to allow ourselves to fall into the prey of anger, because it can be very destructive and harmful to our marriages. And done often enough can be like acid that starts to wear away at the very fiber of the relationship and can destroy it. So I would strongly suggest you review this video when it comes out and try to work on that area, because our sages tell us whoever falls to anger, it's like he worships Avodah Zarah. Why is that? Why do our rabbis tell us that if you fall to anger or demonstrate anger, it's like you're worshiping idols? Anger is saying to God, I don't like the way you're running my affairs. I don't like the way you're running my life. And Emunah means whatever happens in my life is from God and orchestrated from God. So knowing that, I should always remind myself that it's from God, and so I shouldn't be angry at anybody who is God's stick. You understand? But when I do get angry, our rabbis tell us it's like I'm worshiping idols, because it's no longer believing in God. It's believing in another deity and not God. So we have to be very cautious with that. Again, thank you so much. Tune in hopefully very soon, and I'll announce it when the fly is coming up for part 4. Have a wonderful weekend, and a great Shabbat Shalom, and have a great Shabbos. If anybody has any questions on dating or Shalom Bayis, if you need help in any way, reach out to me at 305-206-1916. Have a wonderful day tomorrow. All the best.